Rain streaked the windows of the lawyer's office, a gray smear against the Seattle skyline. Lila Carter sat slumped in a stiff leather chair, her damp sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and printer ink, a sterile contrast to the chaos swirling in her head. Uncle Jonah was gone heart attack, they said, sudden and quiet, and now she was here, picking through the wreckage of his life like a vulture. She tugged at the frayed hem of her hoodie, waiting for the lawyer to get to the point. "Here's the will," Mr. Grayson said, sliding a crisp envelope across the desk. His voice was clipped, professional, like he'd read 100 of these this month. "Jonah left you something specific, said it'd give you roots." Lila snorted, snatching the envelope. "Roots? He knew I'm barely keeping my head above water with rent and barista tips. What'd he leave me? His old camping gear?" Grayson didn't smile. The pawn shop, Jonah's odds ends down on Pike Street. Her fingers froze on the envelope's edge. The pawn shop, that crumbling relic she'd spent half her childhood in doodling comic book characters while Jonah bartered with desperate customers. It was a hoard of junk guitars with busted strings, chipped teacups, a taxidermy raccoon no one wanted. She'd seen the books once, it hadn't turned a profit in years. A sinking ship, and now it was hers. "You're kidding," she said, voice flat. "He left me a money pit." "It's yours to do with as you see fit," Grayson replied, adjusting his tie. "Sell it, keep it, burn it down legally, of course." He was adamant. "You have it." Lila stared at the envelope, her chest tightening. Jonah hadn't just been her uncle, he'd been her anchor. After her parents split when she was 10, he'd taken her in on weekends, filling her head with wild stories about lost artifacts and ancient digs. He'd been an archaeologist once before the pawn shop swallowed his dreams. She trusted him with every messy sketch, every half-baked idea for her graphic novel that still sat unfinished on her laptop. And now he dumped this on her. She tore open the envelope, scanning the words, "To Lila, my truest treasure, I leave Jonah's odds ends." "It's more than it seems." "More than it seems," she muttered. "Yeah, right." That afternoon, she stood outside the shop, rain dripping off her hood onto the cracked sidewalk. The faded sign creaked in the wind, the Owen odds half peeled away. Through the grimy windows, she glimpsed cluttered shelves and flickering fluorescent lights. It smelled like mildew, even from out here, a sour tang that clung to her nose. She unlocked the door with the gel de bell jingling like a ghost welcoming her back. Inside, dust-coated everything: pawned watches, tarnished jewelry, a stack of yellow paperbacks. The wooden floor groaned under her weight, and the air was thick with the scent of old leather and regret. She wandered past the counter, trailing her fingers over a chipped porcelain cat, memories flooding in. Jonah leaning over that counter, winking as he told her a cracked vase came from a pirate's hoard. She believed him then, her 11-year-old self sketching pirate battles late into the night. Now she just saw a mess she didn't have time to clean up. Her gaze drifted to the back, where a narrow hallway led to his office. Business stuff, he'd always said, shooing her away with that sly grin. She'd never pushed, but now curiosity gnawed at her. If there was any clue why he'd saddled her with this place, it'd be there. The office door creaked open, revealing a chaos of papers piled on an oak desk. Faded maps lined the walls, dig sites from his past life, she guessed, and a sagging bookshelf held leather journals. She rifled through the desk, finding receipts, a half-empty whiskey bottle, nothing useful. Then she saw it. A faint seam in the hardwood floor beneath the rug. Heart thudding, she shoved the desk aside, the scrape of wood echoing in the quiet. The rug came up easily, revealing a trap door with a rusted handle. "Jonah, you sneaky bastard," she thought, prying it open. A ladder descended into darkness, the air below cool and metallic like a vault unsealed. She climbed down, her phone's flashlight cutting through the gloom. The basement was small, concrete-walled, and lined with shelves. No pawnshop junk here, these were artifacts. A jade dagger gleamed under the light, its handle carved with swirling patterns. A silver locket sat in a velvet box, its chain coiled like a snake. A cracked clay tablet rested on a stand, etched with symbols she didn't recognize. In the center, a steel box sat on a pedestal, locked with a digital keypad. No dust, no decay, just pristine, deliberate order. Lila's breath caught. This wasn't a pawnshop stash. This was Jonah's secret, something he'd hidden from the world. She ran her fingers over the box, its surface cold against her skin. Whatever was inside, it was why he'd left her this place. Not a burden, but a mystery. For the first time since his death, grief gave way to something else, wonder, sharp and insistent, pulling her forward. Who were you, Jonah? She whispered, the words swallowed by the silence. She didn't have the code yet, but she'd find it. She had to. Lila sat cross-legged on the basement floor of Jonah's odds, the steel box balanced on her knees. The Seattle rain drummed against the shop's roof, a steady thrum that matched the pulse in her ears. The jade dagger, silver locket, and clay tablet gleamed on the shelves around her, their strangeness sinking in. She spent the last 2 days down here, avoiding her barista shifts and the landlord's texts about late rent. The box's keypad stared back at her, unyielding no combination she tried. Jonah's birthday, her birthday, the shop's address, work. Her fingers hovered over the digits, frustration bubbling up. Come on, Jonah, she muttered. You didn't leave me a puzzle just to watch me fail. She traced the box's edges, searching for a hint, when her thumb brushed a tiny groove on the underside. A click sounded, and a hidden slot slid open, revealing a folded note in Jonah's neat scrawl. Look where the story's live. Lila frowned, glancing around. The basement held artifacts, not books. Then it hit her, the office upstairs, those sagging shelves of journals she'd barely glanced at. Scrambling back up the ladder, she hauled every leather-bound volume off the bookshelf, their spines cracking as she flipped through them. Most were diglogs from Jonah's archaeology days, dry notes about soil layers and pottery shards. But one, tucked behind the others, felt different. Its cover was worn smooth, no title, just a faint compass rose embossed in the leather. Inside, sketches spilled across the pages, the dagger, the locket, the tablet, each labeled a key of balance. Cryptic phrases followed stabilize the fracture, 3 to hold the world, and a map with coordinates circling the globe. Lila's breath hitched as she read the last entry. Lila's the only one I trust to finish this. The compass will show her. She darted back to the basement, punching the shop's founding year minus 1987 from a plaque upstairs into the keypad. The box beeped, then popped open. Inside lay a sleek, touchscreen compass, its surface lighting up at her touch. The needle spun wildly before settling on a direction northeast, far beyond Seattle. This is insane, she said to the empty room. The journal hinted at a quest, 3 keys tied to some cosmic or ecological equilibrium left unfinished by Jonah. Selling the shop would have been the smart move, paying off debts and funding her graphic novel. But that note, Lila's the only one hooked into her, tugging at the part of her that still heard Jonah's voice cheering her on. She couldn't walk away, not yet. 3 days later, she stepped off a train in rural Japan, the compass warm in her pocket. The coordinates led to a Shinto shrine nestled in a grove of cherry trees, their blossoms drifting like pink snow in the crisp March air. The shrine was small, wooden, its roof curling up at the edges. Incense hung heavy in the breeze, sharp and smoky, mingling with the damp earth under her boots. Lila clutched the journal, its map marking the spot as the first stop. An old man in a gray robe emerged from the shrine, sweeping the steps with a bamboo broom. His eyes flicked to the compass peeking from her jacket, narrowing slightly. You're Jonah's girl, he said in accented English, leaning on the broom. He spoke of you. Lila blinked, caught off guard. You knew him. He never mentioned this place. The man hero, he introduced himself, nodded. He came years ago, left something here, said it'd choose its keeper. Choose, Lila snorted. I'm not exactly the chosen one type. I just want to know what he was up to. Hero tilted his head, studying her. Then look, it's waiting. He led her inside, past red pillars and paper lanterns, to a stone altar. There, nestled in a wooden case, was the jade dagger from the basement, except this one pulsed faintly, a soft green glow rippling through its blade. Lila's stomach flipped. She'd assumed the basement held the real keys, but these were duplicates or decoys. The real ones were out here, scattered. It's older than this shrine, Hero said, voice low. Jonah said it balances something vital. He wouldn't say what. Lila hesitated, then reached for it. The dagger hummed against her palm, warm and alive, the glow brightening at her touch. Great, so I'm stuck babysitting a glow stick with a past. Hero didn't smile. It chose you. That's no small thing. Back at her cramped hostel that night, Lila sat on a thin futon, the dagger beside her. The compass now pointed northwest, another key, another trip. The journal's warnings gnawed at her. Those who misuse the keys will break more than they mend. She traced the compass rose on its cover, her reflection distorted in the screen. Jonah had been meticulous, obsessive even, but this was beyond him, beyond her. Why me, Jonah? She whispered, the cherry blossoms outside tapping the window like an answer she couldn't hear. She wasn't a hero, just a barista with a sketch pad and a pile of regrets. But the dagger's glow felt like a promise, and the compass's pull was undeniable. She'd go to the next spot, Iceland. If the map was right, not for answers, not yet, but because Jonah had believed she could. Lila packed her bag, the weight of the dagger settling into her bones. Whatever this was, she was in it now. No turning back. Lila's boots crunched on black volcanic gravel as she trekked across Iceland's barren landscape, the compass glowing faintly in her gloved hand. The air bit at her face, sharp with sulfur from nearby geothermal vents, and the sky hung low, a bruised gray that swallowed the horizon. She'd landed in Reykjavik 2 days ago, jet-lagged and jittery, the jade dagger tucked in her backpack alongside Jonah's journal. The compass had led her here, to a remote cave carved into a lava field, its coordinates scrawled in Jonah's cryptic map. The second key waited she could feel it, a pull she couldn't explain. Steam curled from fissures in the ground, the earth rumbling faintly beneath her. She adjusted her scarf, the wool damp from her breath, and checked the journal again. A riddle circled the Iceland entry where fire meets ice, the heart lies still. She puzzled over it on the flight, sketching theories in her notebook, maybe a geothermal pool or a frozen crater. The cave's entrance loomed ahead, a jagged maw framed by icicles, and her gut told her this was it. Inside, the air shifted, warm and thick, the walls glistening with moisture. Her flashlight beam danced over basalt columns, their edges sharp as blades. The compass steadied, pointing deeper in. She navigated a narrow tunnel, the ceiling brushing her hood until it opened into a chamber. At its center stood a stone slab, cracked and mossy, holding a silver locket identical to the one in Jonah's basement. But this one shimmered, its surface pulsing like a heartbeat. Lila's pulse quickened. Another real key. She stepped closer, reciting the riddle under her breath. Fire meets ice, the chamber was a paradox. Steam rose from a bubbling pool on one side while frost clung to the opposite wall. The locket sat where they converged. She reached for it, fingers trembling, and the metal was cold yet alive, tingling against her skin. A faint click sounded as she lifted it, revealing a hidden groove in the slab. Inside lay a folded parchment, Jonah's handwriting stark against the yellowed paper. The keys hold balance. Guard them, Lila. Others will come. Others, she muttered, stuffing the note in her pocket. The journal had warned of misuse, but this felt personal, like Jonah knew she'd be hunted. She turned to leave, the locket heavy in her hand, when a shadow flickered across the cave mouth. Instinct kicked in. She ducked behind a column, heart hammering as footsteps echoed deliberate, not the wind. A figure emerged, hooded and sleek in a black parka, their breath visible in the dim light. They carried a handheld scanner, its red beam sweeping the chamber. No staff-wielding mystic, just a tech-savvy operative, and that made it worse. Lila clutched the locket, her mind racing. They tracked her. "Give me the keys," the figure said, voice low and clipped, amplified by the cave's acoustics. "Or you won't leave this cave." Lila peeked out, her sarcasm a flimsy shield. "You want them? Tell me why Jonah died for them first." The figure stiffened, scanner pausing. "He didn't tell you? Figures, hand them over, and you might live long enough to find out." She edged backwards, scanning for an exit. "Pass. I'm not big on ultimatums from strangers in hoods." They lunged, faster than expected, the scanner dropping as they drew a stun baton crackling with blue light. Lila dodged, the baton grazing her sleeve, sending a jolt through her arm. She stumbled, adrenaline surging, and grabbed a loose rock from the floor. She hurled it, aiming for their head, but it clanged off the wall. The figure swung again, and she rolled aside, the baton sparking against the stone. Then the ground trembled, violent, sudden. Dust rained from the ceiling, cracks splintering the walls. A geothermal quake, common here, but perfectly timed. The figure froze, hood slipping to reveal a sharp jawline and cold eyes before they bolted back toward the tunnel. Lila stayed low, gripping the locket as the shaking subsided, her breath ragged. They were gone for now. She stumbled out into the gray dusk, the sulfur stench stronger, the locket's pulse syncing with her own. The compass flickered, pointing northwest again, Morocco next. She sank onto a boulder, pulling the parchment from her pocket. "Guard them, Lila." Jonah's voice echoed in her head, steady and warm, like when he'd critique her sketches. "You're overthinking it, kid. Trust the lines." She trusted him then. Could she now? Back at her Reykjavik hostel, she sat on a lumpy cot, the locket beside the dagger. 2 keys, 2 pieces of something bigger. The journal hinted at a fracture, ecological collapse, maybe, or something weirder, and the keys as a fix. But who was that figure? A rival treasure hunter. A government agent. Jonah's past was a tangle she couldn't unpick, and now it was hers. She traced the locket's filigree shimmer hypnotic. What did you get me into, Jonah? She whispered. The attacker's words gnawed at her. He didn't tell you? Had Jonah's death been more than a heart attack? Paranoia crept in, tightening her chest, but so did resolve. She wasn't just a barista with a sketch pad anymore. She was in this, hunted or not. Lila packed her bag, the keys weight grounding her. Morocco loomed ahead, the third key waiting. Whoever others were, they'd come again. She'd be ready, or at least pretend to be. Jonah had believed in her lines, time to trust them herself. Lila's boots sank into the dusty trail winding up Morocco's Atlas Mountains, the air dry and gritty against her skin. The sun blazed overhead, turning the rocky peaks into a jagged silhouette against a cloudless sky. She'd arrived in Morocco a day ago, the compass guiding her from Iceland's chill to this arid expanse. The jade dagger and silver locket weighed down her backpack, their faint pulses a constant heme she couldn't ignore. Jonah's journal lay open in her hand, its final coordinates pointing to a hermit's hut perched high above the desert. The third key, the clay tablet, waited there, and with it, maybe answers. Sand gritted underfoot as she climbed, the scent of sun-baked stone mixing with faint traces of sage carried on a warm breeze. Her muscles ached, but the chase in Iceland had sharpened her focus. Someone wanted the keys enough to track her across continents, and Jonah's warning echoed, "Guard them, Lila." She stopped sketching escape plans in her head. Whatever this was, she'd see it through. The hut came into view, a squat structure of mud brick blending into the mountainside. A thin plume of smoke curled from his chimney, and an old man sat outside, his weathered hands carving a wooden staff. His eyes, sharp beneath the turban, flicked up as she approached. The compass steadied, its needle locked on him. "You're late," he said in accented English, not looking up from his work. "Jonah said you'd come sooner." Lila stopped, wiping sweat from her brow. "You knew him too? What is this, a global fan club?" The man Amir, he called himself, grunted, setting the staff aside. "He stayed here once, years back. Left something for you." He rose, beckoning her inside. The hut was dim, smelling of cedar and old paper. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with jars and scrolls, but at the center stood a low table. On it rested the clay tablet from Jonah's basement or its twin, etched with the same cryptic symbols, glowing faintly red. Lila's breath caught. She'd come full circle. "It's the third key," Amir said, folding his arms. Jonah called them balance. Said they hold a fracture together, earth, sky, something deeper. He never finished figuring it out. "Balance?" Lila echoed, reaching for the tablet. It was warm, heavier than it looked, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. "What's fracturing? Climate? Tectonics? I'm not a scientist, I draw comics." Amir's gaze softened, almost pitying. "He didn't leave you science, he left you a choice. The keys need a heart to guide them. What's yours telling you?" She stared at the tablet, then pulled the dagger and locket from her bag. Laying them side by side, she watched their glow sink green, silver, red forming a pattern, incomplete but deliberate. She pressed them together, and a jolt shot through her, sharp and electric. Visions flickered, forests burning, oceans rising, a calm sky splitting open, then mending. She gasped, yanking her hands back, the images fading but the weight lingering. "What the hell was that?" she demanded, voice shaky. Amir shrugged. "A glimpse." Jonah saw it too, said it's why he stopped too big for one man. Lila sank onto a stool, the keys glinting in the dim light. Jonah's journal had no endgame, just sketches and warnings. "Lila's the only one I trust." She'd chased his faith across the world, from Seattle's rain to Japan's blossoms, Iceland's caves to this dusty hut. But for what? To fix a fracture she didn't understand, to hand them over to someone else? The hooded figure's threat replayed, "You might live long enough to find out," and she wondered if they'd already found her trail. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, tracing the tablet's edges. "He thought I could finish this, but I'm just me." Amir leaned forward, his voice steady. "That's why he chose you. Not a soldier, not a scholar, just you." Back in Morocco that night, Lila sat on a hostel rooftop, the city's lights sprawling below. The keys rested in her lap, their glow dim but persistent. She flipped through the journal, landing on a doodle Jonah had drawn years ago, a stick figure, Lila holding a torch. Caption, "She'll light the way." She'd laughed at it then, a kid with big dreams. Now it felt like a plea. The compass buzzed, it screamed blank, no more coordinates. The quest was hers to shape. She could hide the keys, bury Jonah's secret in the desert, and go back to pouring lats. Or she could keep going, chase the fractured source, face whoever hunted her. Both paths scared her, but running wasn't an option anymore. I'm not giving up, she whispered, the words solidifying as she said them. Not for power, not for glory, just for you, Jonah. Her hands steadied, clutching the journal to her chest. She wasn't the girl who'd inherited a pawnshop weeks ago, drowning in doubt. She'd faced caves and attackers, crossed oceans on a hunch. Maybe that was the balance Jonah meant, not the keys, but her. Footsteps echoed on the stairs too quick, too deliberate. Lila tensed, slipping the keys into her bag. A shadow loomed in the doorway and she stood, heart pounding. The journey wasn't over. Whatever waited answers, danger, or both, she'd meet it head on, not for the world, but for the legacy she claimed.